The arena was buzzing with energy, but Becky Lynch stood in the center of it all, radiating defiance as she confidently announced that the floor would not be open for discussion tonight. She asserted that physically, she was fine, repeating the words almost to convince not just the crowd, but perhaps herself too. Music suddenly hit, and a familiar face emerged, Nikki Bella. Her presence added a sudden jolt of tension to the atmosphere. She approached Becky not with animosity at first, but with a strange blend of admiration and passive aggression. Nikki greeted Becky and admitted to overhearing her earlier monologue. With a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes, she agreed with Becky's self-praise, acknowledging her as one of the greatest women's wrestlers of all time. Becky grinned and reinforced it. The greatest. Nikki kept up the facade, saying how proud she was of Becky's accomplishments and reminisced about the first time she met her. Back then, Nikki saw real promise in Becky, a rising star in the women's division. Nikki spoke as though she had once felt assured enough to step away from the ring because people like Becky were ready to carry the division forward. She expressed gratitude and admiration, and Becky responded with equal respect, saying that it meant a lot and that she had always admired Nikki. But then, like a switch being flipped, the tone shifted. Nikki's expression hardened as she said that despite everything, Becky had turned out to be a major disappointment. The crowd audibly reacted, stunned by the sudden heel turn in the conversation. Becky was taken aback and demanded an explanation, not believing what she was hearing. Nikki didn't hesitate. She accused Becky of betraying the very division she had once carried. Nikki argued that Becky, who was once expected to raise the next generation of talent, had instead stifled it. She claimed that Becky wasn't mentoring the future but holding it hostage, keeping others from shining under her overwhelming shadow. Nikki explained that she hadn't returned for a nostalgia trip or to reclaim old glory. She had come back because this was supposed to be the golden era of the women's division. She wanted to challenge herself against the best. But what confused her the most was why Becky came back at all. Nikki questioned whether it was jealousy that drew Becky back to WWE, especially watching rising stars like Lyra dominate. Or perhaps Becky's real motives were tied to a failed attempt at Hollywood success. Becky, never one to back down from a verbal assault, cut Nikki off. She proudly declared that her Hollywood journey was anything but a failure. She was, after all, a featured performer in the summer's biggest blockbuster, Happy Gilmore 2 on Netflix. The movie was a hit, and she had a major role in it. Nikki smugly confirmed it. Yes, Becky was in the film. But Becky turned the tables again by throwing in a pointed reminder. She remembered Nikki being on set too. In fact, Nikki was originally supposed to be in the same movie. But that role? It got cut. Becky revealed that she had made sure of it. She used her influence and reach outside the ring to have Nikki removed from the project, because in Becky's words, "There's only room in that movie for one of us, and it wasn't going to be you." That bombshell drew gasps from the audience and visibly shook Nikki. But Nikki wasn't going to let Becky get the last word. She was tired of Becky's grandstanding. She called Becky a liar, just like her husband, Seth Rollins. And while Seth's lies were convincing enough to win people over, Becky's weren't. Nikki said nobody was buying Becky's BS. According to her, Becky had always been the same, an insecure, frightened girl who never really grew into the role she so desperately claimed to own. She hadn't evolved, she had only built walls. Becky, now clearly incensed, cut Nikki off again and warned her not to drag her husband into this. She fiercely defended her relationship, proudly claiming that she and Seth were the greatest wrestling couple in history. Then she delivered another personal blow. At one time, Nikki and her own partner were considered wrestling's power couple, but now Nikki couldn't see him anymore, a painfully obvious dig at Nikki's ex, John Cena, who famously lives by the motto, "You can't see me." With tension peaking, Becky reminded Nikki that her arrival in WWE was specifically to take on the outdated era that Nikki once dominated. Becky insisted that she wasn't obligated to preserve the past. She had come to revolutionize the women's division, not protect its traditions. Nikki fired back, claiming that this wasn't Becky's era anymore and that Becky had lost her grip. Then she threw down the challenge that everyone watching had been waiting for. In Nikki's era, Becky had always avoided facing her one-on-one. Nikki accused Becky of being too afraid to take that risk back then. But now, in this supposedly new generation that Becky wanted to lead, Nikki was ready. She called for a match, a one-on-one showdown, Nikki Bella versus Becky Lynch, with Becky's Intercontinental Championship on the line. The crowd roared in anticipation, sensing that this confrontation was finally becoming physical. Becky, with a smirk forming on her face, was about to respond when the heat in the ring reached a boiling point. Becky never gave Nikki a verbal answer. Instead, she launched a cheap shot. A sudden, vicious attack. 1, 2, 3 hard blows caught Nikki by surprise. Becky wasn't waiting for a contract or a bell. She was already treating it like a fight. The two women, both veterans and icons of their respective generations, clashed in a fiery display of raw emotion, ambition, and resentment. It was more than just a rivalry. This was a generational collision. One woman represented the revolutionary force that broke through glass ceilings and ushered in the women's evolution in WWE, while the other was part of the era that laid the groundwork with glitz, fame, and reality TV celebrity status. Both had changed the game, but they each despised the way the other had done it. In Becky's eyes, Nikki was the face of the era she had to demolish to make space for real wrestling. To Nikki, Becky was the insecure child who had ridden a wave of online support into superstardom, only to become exactly what she once despised, self-serving and elitist. The tension between them wasn't just about championships or spotlight. It was personal. It was history. And now it was exploding right in front of the fans. Becky's attack wasn't just a statement, it was a war cry. Nikki didn't take it lightly either. Even after being hit, her expression screamed revenge. She had been waiting years for this moment, and Becky had just given her all the fuel she needed. What made this confrontation even more intense was the unspoken narrative playing out beneath it all. Nikki Bella, once dismissed by hardcore wrestling fans as a product of the Divas era, was now standing toe-to-toe with a woman who symbolized the modern evolution of women's wrestling. The debate over who truly carried the division, who defined greatness, who sacrificed more, was now no longer theoretical. It was heading toward physical resolution. And Becky Lynch, despite her accolades, seemed rattled. Nikki had peeled back some emotional layers. She had called Becky insecure, reminded her of past fears, questioned her Hollywood pursuits, and poked at her marriage. It wasn't just an insult war, it was psychological warfare. Nikki Bella was showing the WWE universe that she wasn't back just to wave to the crowd.
She won.